Hello everyone, I'm Samjit, and this is the first session of Linux from Scratch, which is our Linux Club's own small series of teaching all of you about Linux, what it is, how it works, why we need it, and this is just an introductory session of Videshwar said. So in this session, we're not going to be actually touching Linux. We're just going to be talking about it and how you're going to install it and everything. So after this session is complete, uh, we are expecting that every one of you will have Linux installed either on your laptop or preferably on a virtual machine. Okay. So first of all, let's start. What exactly is Linux? Whenever most people say Linux, they're usually talking about the operating system, which is a free and open source operating system. So people will say, yeah, I use Linux, I have Linux, but they usually say Linux to mean the entire operating system, which is not entirely correct, not technically correct. It's okay to say, but Linux is actually just the kernel of the OS, which is the core of an operating system. I don't know if you guys have studied the operating system subject yet, but a kernel is the part of the OS which manages the memory at the lowest level, which allocates which process needs to be run, and takes care of all the things that any user program can never take care of. So if you're writing a program, you need that program to run. To you need it to be paused if something important is happening, and there are a lot of things which a user, a developer cannot take care of. So the OS kernel takes care of that stuff. So Linux is technically just the kernel of the OS, which is just a part of a complete free and open source operating system. And that is why that operating system, the complete operating system is called a Linux distribution. So a Linux distribution includes the Linux kernel, of course. It often includes a package manager, and a package manager is a piece of software which you use to install other software. So it's basically like the Windows Store in Windows or the App Store in uh, mobile operating systems. A package manager, and it may also include a desktop environment. What is a desktop environment? A desktop environment is basically uh, how the operating system manages its windows. And I don't mean Windows, the operating system, with these windows. So how it manages Windows, how it manages the GUI, how it manages rendering, all of that. That everything is handled by the desktop environment. And a distribution may also contain device drivers. You might know device drivers are pieces of low-level software which help the OS communicate with other hardware devices like keyboards and mice and other things. Okay, so Linux is just the kernel, and the kernel is a part of a larger operating system called a Linux distribution. And most of the Linux distributions we use contain software which comes from the GNU software project. And the GNU software project is basically a free and open source software project which contains many packages. It contains many pieces of software, and all of those are free and open source. And when we say free, we don't only mean free of cost. We mostly mean free as in libre. So you, if you guys want to know, there are two kinds of free. One is gratis and one is libre. Gratis means you can get it free of cost. Libre means you have the freedom to do anything with it. Okay, so when we say free and open source software, the free there is libre. It's not always gratis. Someone can charge you for Linux, but they cannot stop you from doing what you want with your Linux distribution. Okay, yeah. So as most of the external software, the software apart from the kernel, comes from the GNU software project, some people might also some people also call it GNU Linux or GNU plus Linux or any other variation of that. But that is usually, and Richard Stallman, the founder of GNU, also says that. And this is mainly because they want to highlight the contribution of the GNU software project in the whole distribution and in the whole ecosystem. Because calling it just Linux kind of strips their credit if you want to think about it like that. Okay, and Linux was created by Linus Torvalds. He's, I think, a Finnish developer. and he created it in 1991. And he was inspired by another operating system kernel called Minix. Okay, and you will notice that Linux, Minix, all of these have the X at the end. That is kind of because, okay, so Linux was the name was created by, it is Linus's Unix. So Linus plus Unix, Linux. But why is it Unix, and why is there the ending IX in Unix? Because all of these kernels are in the Unix-like family of operating systems. So, if to understand the history of this, Unix was an early operating system created at Bell Labs, and which is called AT&T now, I think. And if you see this diagram, the original Unix versions, many other operating systems were created from it, like BSD, PWB, and you will see that or some operating system kernels directly share code. If you see the solid line, you can see this is the first version, and like all of these different kernels, they share code directly from the Unix system. There are also some operating systems which do not share the code directly, but they are compatible with Unix. So if you guys know about the Windows and DOS world, IBM was the first PC, and many other manufacturers copied IBM's disk operating system. So it is kind of like that. Unix was an original operating system, and many other systems basically made their own systems compatible with Unix. So basically, you can use Minix, while because Unix was closed source. As you can see, Unix was never like fully open source. It was mostly proprietary. But these Unix-like systems created an open source version of Linux, which is in my opinion, the best thing about them. So you can see this is when Linux was started and how it's progressed now. Okay, so now why do we use Linux? Why do we need it? So basically, every device you have needs an operating system. Okay, like we have web servers. Like web servers are very performance intense. They need to handle a lot of requests. There needs to be like a robust concurrency and multi-threading stuff in the OS. We have Android phones. We have um, desktops, and we have like smart appliances. Like every smart fridge or everything needs an OS. And the use cases are so different and so vast that you can't really, you need to be able to modify you create your own system, or you need to modify an existing one. And when you are modifying, it's easier to modify Linux than Windows, because if you need to modify Windows, you basically need to tell Microsoft that we want this, and Microsoft decides that if Microsoft wants to do it or not. So with Linux, anyone can customize it, which be it's because it's a Libre, because it is a Libre and free and open source. So anyone can modify Linux, which is why like every kind of system uses Linux. Web servers, Android phones, desktops, smart appliances, because it's infinitely customizable. If you take like a microcontroller, like the Raspberry Pi, it also uses a different version of Linux, which is very stripped down and which is customized to run on that different architecture. So that's why the free and open source nature of Linux enables it to be infinitely customizable, which makes it mostly a better choice than any other proprietary system, because users can pick and choose the parts they want and create a custom, perfectly suited to their job version of it. And we can just see how Windows and Linux differ. There are a lot of superficial differences, like they look different. The software that runs on them is of course different. But on a more basic level, like if you ask someone who's not interested or who doesn't know anything about Linux, they only know either Windows or Mac or something like that. So for them, Linux is like, oh, it's a separate version or something. Like that is obviously not true. It is not a replacement, neither a separate version. And this is an important point. It is not a direct replacement for Windows, because everything that works in Windows won't run in Linux. it is an alternative tool. So you can use it for the same jobs, but you can't use it with the same tools. So both are operating systems, but Windows is proprietary and it is closed source. So Windows, it might be free if you download it not very legitimately, but it is not libre. You cannot take the source code of Windows and say remove the telemetry or modify the start menu in the source code. So Windows is very proprietary and closed source, and it can only be changed in the way Microsoft wants users to change it. So that is a downside of it. Next, we have the Linux family tree and installation instructions, which will be given by Bileshwan.
Thank you, Samrit. It was a nice session coming from you. We saw some very important points. So let me continue through that. Yeah. So as Samrit said, Linux is just a kernel, and an OS is something that adds some functionalities to it, like a desktop manager or like a package manager or how you install software, etc. And that is what makes it a Linux distribution. So if you talk about Linux, it's just an open source kernel. So what do you mean by open source is you can just as you were saying that Linus Torvalds, you can see this guy here, and he to this day he always commits to his like the Linux kernel tree. You can see every day he commits, and what you can see is he is the only one who is merging the commits and he is making the changes, etc. But you'll see many pull requests coming from people, contributors from all over the world who are trying to make changes in the kernel. So that is what we mean by when we say that Linux is liber and Linux is open source. Here you can see it's the Linux kernel source tree. That this is the kernel which was released by Linux Torvalds, and all of its code is like literally available in public. So due to this reason, Linux is much more secure than Windows is, because many developers all around the world can just take a look at the code, and if they find a bug, yeah, if it looks like a bug to me, they can just open a pull request, they can fix that, and that is how we have joined hands. But if you see in Microsoft, there are some open source parts, but none of it's like VS Code is somewhat open source, but you can't say anything is available to their Windows OS. So that is why it's like a closed system. So only specific developers are working on it. So you can't like you know that like if many people work upon a project, they have different perspectives, they have different ideas, so they can shape the project in a better way. But if you close it out, so it just grows, but it doesn't, it has some security issues. That is why it said that Windows is the most vulnerable OS ever made. That is why it is said, because it's maybe it's not open source, and yeah, it's like it makes sense. Microsoft has this as proprietary software. So that is why we all urge everyone to switch to Linux, because it's free of cost, it's secure, it's like it gives you the power of using your own OS. You control everything upon your OS, which processes need which attention, how many cores you want to attach, etc. You can modify the source code, you can just do things whatever you want, you can customize it. Like the computer will be in your own hands. That is why it is said like that. So that was what I would like to add to Samit's point. And after that, let's look at the Linux family tree. So basically, this tree shows the whole timeline of how Linux was developed. How like we to this date we have more than like uncountable distributions of Linux. So this is the timeline which shows from where did it start and now how are we going. So if you see, this is here in 1992, and it's all the way till 2022. This is just a Wikipedia SVG file which you are seeing now. So I hope everyone can see. I have sent the link. So let's start with the first distribution which you'll see is Slackware Linux. So it's developed kind of in the 1992 to 1993. So it was the first ever Linux, and it's a mother to many operating systems. Like you can see, I will just uh, minimize the size. Yeah. Hopefully, you can see it is the mother to many operating systems like Slackle, Wi-Fi Way, Agilia Linux, like Kate OS. It's not kind of used much, but yeah, it is a ancient Linux distribution. So like nowadays, people are not using this. So it was kind of used in 1992, and from that we had some Linux distributions. But you can see after maybe 2012 or 13, we didn't have any more distributions to this this line of Slackware Linux. So that is why it stopped. It's like a kind of old and like deprecated. People are still using, but yeah, it's not used kind of now. But yeah, you can see the SUSE Linux. It started from Slackware Linux and it's gained its popularity now. If you see SUSE Linux, Yeah, from here you can see the SUSE. It's now open SUSE, which is like a very much popular, and now it's being developed into Gecko Linux and Easy NIS. So yeah, it's kind of gaining popularity that way. So apart from that, if you see, we have this Debian. Debian is considered like the mother of many operating systems, Linux-based distros. Which you can see, like Ubuntu. If you'll see, if you follow this line through, yeah, the orange line here, you can just search for it. Text are very small. Yeah. So here you will see Ubuntu, and it's totally, yeah. Here is Ubuntu, and it's totally based on Debian. So you know this is the family tree. So first is Debian, then comes Ubuntu. From Ubuntu, there you can see Kubuntu, Xubuntu, etc. like that. And from Ubuntu, you'll further see like Ubuntu Touch, Ubuntu Mate, which is like very popular now, Ubuntu Pack, etc. Apart from that, let's see anything new. Yeah, I'll just show you Kali Linux and etc. They're also part of this Debian family tree. Yeah, here is Kali. So it's also the part of the Debian, and if you see Pop OS, it's also the part of Debian, I guess. Pop OS, yeah, it's also developed from the Ubuntu lining only. So what do we mean by say if we this is a family? So what we mean is Debian is has a package manager called APT. You must have heard of it. So from APT, like it has some source code, and Ubuntu modified its source code to improve its functionality. And from Ubuntu we had Pop OS, which modified the course like the source code of Ubuntu and made it more efficient. So from the left side you see it is the common, like this source code is common to every operating system on the right hand side. So this is the family of Linux, Debian. I know it's a bit complicated because it's like listed every possible Linux distro ever, but we don't need to look at every one of it. It was just to give you an idea. So now you might have a question like where is like all the Arch or the Red Hat Enterprise, etc. So they come from a different family. Debian is actually this family, and the Parrot OS and the Kali, etc. all fall under this Debian Linux. If you come to down, you can see here a point which is called the Red Hat. So Red Hat had started its own line in maybe I am sure, yeah, 1994, 1995. From there, we'll see it has modified into Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Red Hat Enterprise is like a competitor of Windows. It's used for business systems, which is open source. So yeah, so Red Hat Enterprise. From there, we have Oracle Enterprise also. If you have heard of Oracle Linux, etc., it's all from Red Hat. And what else? CentOS, you must have heard. It's all from Red Hat. So the package manager which Red Hat uses is called Yum. It also uses the RPL packages if you would have heard. So yeah, so that is about Red Hat. And Fedora, yeah, Fedora, the DNS package manager, it also falls under this Red Hat family tree only. What else we can see is this is about Red Hat, and SUSE we already covered from Slackware. Apart from that, yeah, Gen 2. Gen 2 is like very popular, and it's like the what do you say? It's the toughest of operating systems because in that operating system you just control everything from scratch. You build it from direct the sources. So yeah, it started from Gen 2 is started here from 2002, and it goes on to systems like Chromium OS, Chrome OS, Core OS, if you would have heard of it. So all those were started from Gen 2. And Arch Linux, of course, it starts its own family line from 2003, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So it has from Arch Linux, it's started to many like Black Arch, if you would have heard, is like cybersecurity related OS based on Arch, and also this Blue Star Linux or Arch Labs, etc. So these are some of the main families, if you will say, which I will show you is, and yeah, etc. One more point is these are some Linux OS which are like have no family you can say, but they are just a small operating system on their own. For example, if you see Puppy Linux, yeah, you can see a Puppy OS. So it started on its own. It doesn't have any family, so it has its own source code. But yeah, it started on its own, and it has many operating systems which is based upon the Puppy OS. So you can see these are the Alpine Linux, if you would have heard, etc. They all started from this open source, like their own point, without any family. So this was it, basically the Linux family tree. I'll show you a simplified version, which will like clearly likely clear much of your doubts. Yeah, this is the simplified version. I just used from it from a YouTube video. I'll share you the link. So yeah, here's a Linux family. You have Debian here, as we saw, Red Hat here, and Arch here. From Debian, you have Ubuntu, you have Kali, you have Parrot OS, you have Backbox, etc. All these Kali and Parrot OS are used for cybersecurity stuffs, etc. And Linux Mint is also based on Debian. From Red Hat, we talked about you have Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you have CentOS, you have Oracle Linux, etc. from Red Hat. From Arch, as you know, you have Black Arch, which we use for cybersecurity related stuff, and ArchStrike is also like OS. So this is the Linux family which I will tell you here. So now let's look at the functionalities of some of these flavors, like how to know that which flavor is the right for you. So if you see Debian, it is the starting point of many operating systems. So it is the mother of many distros. It is stable and dependable. So it is run by the largest community members because it started from like 20 or 25 years back. So if you want a stable and dependable OS, you can always go for Debian. But yeah, Gen 2. Let's come to Gen 2. It's used by experts and developers. So I would not suggest it for beginners to try Gen 2 because there you'll be confused and you will have to do everything from scratch. So it's better if you try maybe Debian or Ubuntu first, and after that you can switch OSs. That will always be a better option. So yeah, here in Gen 2 you choose every packages you use, everything is built from source as I said, and the package manager which you use here is Portage. And if you come to Ubuntu, it is the like most popular Linux distribution. Like every one of us must have heard Ubuntu. May they use Linux or not, may they use even many laptops which are provided by government facilities use this Ubuntu open source software. So it has now also good gaming support as we have seen from our members, and it's designed for beginners and intermediate people who have switched from another OS to Linux. So it's user friendly, it's very fast, and yeah, it has elegant UI. So you can always go for Ubuntu if it's your starting point in Linux. Also, there is another option which is the Linux Mint. It's also similar to Ubuntu, but it has like it's best for desktop users. If you have a desktop like you like your custom PC or etc., then Linux Mint is right for you. It's similar to Ubuntu, but it has some better. Yeah, I would say from day-to-day use, you can go for Linux Mint. But if you want better UI and better gaming, etc., you can always go for Ubuntu. And coming to RHEL, which is the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, as talked about, it is used for commercial purposes. It is a competitor of Microsoft, I would say. Like in some servers, they typically use this Red Hat Enterprise Linux because it's the best for like server environments, and it's highly secured. Yeah, it's always come like every week we have security patches for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Now, if we talk about Kali Linux and Parrot OS, it's based on the cybersecurity related OSs. What happens is in this OS you will have the basic Linux kernel, you will have display managers, you will have text editors, etc. And apart from that, you will also have a ton of cybersecurity related options. Like you will have, let's say, John the Ripper, you will have Nmap, you will have what do you say, Metasploit framework, etc. You'll have much of the tools which are needed for cybersecurity, penetration testing, etc. pre-installed in this OS. So it's typically said if you want to pursue cybersecurity, etc., you can go with Kali Linux and Parrot OS. And lastly, coming to Pop OS, it has the best gaming support. It has some support for NVIDIA graphics drivers and GPU also, and it has very elegant UI, which I've already seen. And yeah, I would say personally, the tiling here is awesome. What I mean by tiling is when you like, let's say I take it out in a different tab, and yeah, you can see the windows here. So if I want to merge all the windows here, I'll have to do it like this and like this. So it's not like very pretty well. Like you can't see both the windows together. So it's because I'm in Arch and the tiling manager I'm using is the default of GNOME. But if you use the Pop OS tiling manager, it's the best. You can like I would suggest you can see the best all the windows together in just one screen. So that is it. I would say these are some common operating systems, and you can choose which one you would like to install based on your uses. If you need, we'll provide you more links where you can see what is your right operating system you can choose. So as of now, this is what we will talk about as the introduction. So now it's dependent upon you which like OS which flavor you want to go on with. So which flavor you want to go on with, it's dependent on you. I'll also give some more resources which will list many more operating systems, the flavors and their uses. But yeah, typically if you're just using Linux for the first time, my suggestion would be you can go with Ubuntu maybe or either Linux Mint, either of these. And if you are like kind of intermediate and want a good stable OS, you can go for Debian. If not, if you want gaming purposes laptops like gaming purposes OS, you can go for Pop OS. And and for cybersecurity related, you can go for Kali Linux or Paradox. So this will be the flavors of the Linux, and now we'll just see how to install that. Now we have two options here on how to install Linux in your computer. So one is the bare metal version, where you will just install Linux side by side to your Windows. Like you will partition your disk, you will create some space for Linux, and you will boot your, like you will install your Linux in that, so you can dual boot your computer. Like if when you restart your computer, you turn on your computer, you'll have two options. One will be to go use the Windows part, or one will be go use the Linux part. But that would be a bit, like it's not difficult or anything. You'll have resources, you'll have YouTube links, and maybe blog post links which will help you through it. But as of now, for this course, it's just the start, it's just the basics. We'll teach you the terminal things, the file system, and for that we'll need everyone to have a Linux OS at least in your VM. So if you want, feel free to use the dual boot option, where you can create some partition in your Windows space, and you can install Linux in that. But if you're not very much confident on that, we're always there to help. But if you're not very much confident on that, you can always use the virtualization part. We'll be talking about this VirtualBox. So this is Oracle VM VirtualBox. Make sure everyone download this, and I would suggest it better than VMware, because I've used both, and VMware just doesn't let you take screenshots of the OS. What a screenshot is meant is, like if you have if you're running your virtual machine through like maybe 3 to 4 months, you will take screenshots throughout its 4 months, so that you can continue from any part of the OS. Like if you will take the screenshot of the fresh install, for example, what happens after that, you break your machine in like next 2 to 3 months, you can always revert back to the first screenshot. In that way, your OS is always safe. It's always there in your, like the virtual machine is always there in your like computer. You can't ever mess up things on virtual machine. That's why for this tutorial, or at least for this session, we'd suggest every one of you to at least use Linux on this virtual machine. If not, if you're like thrilling, or if you want to take a step ahead, you can seriously go and install it in dual boot option. We'll be ready to help you in every possible case that arises. So here, VirtualBox, you can go to downloads. All of you, just not right now. I'm just showing you the way what you will doing. And if you are on Windows, you will just download it for Windows. It's just the packages. So here you have VirtualBox 6.0 builds. And yeah, so here we'll have for Windows host, you have for, if you're using Linux already, you don't need to use, of course. For if you already have a Linux OS ready, you don't need to install it. You must be knowing that. Apart from that, if you have Mac, you can also go for that. I hope there is for Mac also. Yeah, OS X host. So yeah, you can go to any of this, and you can start the download. I'll just I won't download it because I already have. 1 second, I'll just let someone in the meeting. Alright, so yeah, in this way you can start your download. After VirtualBox is installed, you'll have something of a interface like this. 1 second, let it load. Yeah, so this is your VirtualBox interface. From here, what you'll have to do is, for example, now you'll have to choose your own Linux flavor, what you want to go on with. For example, if you choose Ubuntu, if you want to install Ubuntu in your virtual machine, what we'll do is Ubuntu VM image for VirtualBox. Okay, let's see the. I just want to see the, yeah, Ubuntu image here. So yeah, this will take you to ubuntu.com download desktop. So what you'll have to do is you have to download the ISO file. So here, if you want Ubuntu 22.04 LTS, this is the latest version. You can download it here. You start, it will just start to download. Yeah, it started. So nearly it's like 3 to 4 GBs, the ISO files. Basically, this will be your window, like your operating system file. And after you have downloaded the ISO file, what you can do is you can go to your this VirtualBox. Then you can go on a new machine. And there you can choose the name of your machine. For example, it's like, I'll say it's Ubuntu. Then you'll choose the machine folder where you, like, where do you want your virtual machine to be located. For me, it's like this location, and it will always be a default location, so you don't need to change that. And it will automatically detect whether it's Linux or not, whether it's Ubuntu like 64-bit or not, etc. You just skip on that. Then it goes to next. You'll provide some RAM based on your computer RAM. If you have like 4 GB RAM, 2 gigs, providing 2 GB of RAM for this virtual machine is enough. So you can provide it this way, and just yeah, create a virtual hard disk now. VDI dynamically allocated. You can do that, and you can choose the size of how much memory you want to, like how much size you want to give it to the OS. So if you have 50 GB or 60 GB, if you want it for other purposes as well, you can do. But just for this tutorial, 20 to 30 GB is max, or 20 GB is great. You can just do that. After it, you can see it's like it's there. It's Ubuntu is created. Now what you will have to do is you will go to its settings. 1 second, it's loading. Basically, my screen share is a little slow in this Wayland and desktop environment which I am in, so it just takes some time. After that, you can go to this storage, and here you will choose the controller, the ISO file. So here, as you can see, I have downloaded my Arch Linux.iso file. Similarly, if you are choosing for Windows, if you are choosing for, I'm sorry, if you're choosing for Ubuntu, you will have your Ubuntu.iso file. If you're choosing for any other flavor of Linux, you'll have those ISO file. Just choose that, and accordingly it's like it's updated. 1 second, it's just updating. Yeah, after that you just can click on OK, and now if you'll start your machine, it will just let you through the installation process. It will start if you are choosing Ubuntu, it just everything happens on the GUI. So you'll have to install some basic packages. You'll have to install a simple like a base install, which will give you the whole operating system install. So this is the way which I was telling. Now I'm not showing the whole process because of two reasons. Because I'm just showing it for Ubuntu, and you may choose a different OS, so it's dependent on you. And once I start the installation, you will have to have good internet connectivity, and overall you have like nearly 10 GBs of internet buffer, so that you can install all the packages required for the BS install. So that's why this is the pretty much the basic process. And according to which flavor you choose, we'll just provide you links on like guides and tutorials. For example, if you see, for example, let's say you want to install Pop OS. One second. Install Pop OS in VirtualBox. You see, if you'll surely have a guide. So yeah, this is the guide. So what you'll have to do is the Pop OS ISO, which is the basic file. If you want to go for Ubuntu, you have to download Ubuntu ISO. You just go to the link. It will just open you the Pop OS ISO. Yeah, here you can click on download. It will download you, and after that, yeah, this is the start screen which I told you about. We can create a new VM. You just name it, and you just choose the type, etc. Allowed the memory which I talked you about. Then you choose the hard disk type, and apart from that, yeah, just the name, then the size. Then you can choose if you want to do it in EFI mode, or you want to do it in MBR mode. Generally, new systems use the EFI mode, so you can go with that, and then start the VM. Now, after you start this VM, you just have to choose the ISO file, and then it will get you through the installation process. After you just start, it will just show you next pages. Now how you want to install, etc. It will just go you, and after that you will be ready to install. So after everything is over, you will have a system like this. I'll show you my Arch VM. So if you start here, you will start like this, and you can choose your Arch. So it's basically a total operating system working on top of your host operating system. So if you're even in Windows, you can run Linux in this way, in this virtual mode. Or if you want, which I told you the first way is to use it by dual booting. So you just give the password which you have created. And yeah, I will have a OS like this here. So here we'll have a terminal thing, etc. Everything which is there in the like a normal OS, bare metal OS, will also get in this virtual machine. So you can follow through our tutorials. So yeah, this will be pretty much it for this tutorial. The homework for this tutorial will be, let me just stop the screen share so that my system doesn't lag because it isn't supported. Right. So we showed you the process here. It was an introduction meeting. Now, what your work after this meeting is to choose your own flavor. Like if you want Ubuntu, or if you want Kali Linux, or if you want Arch, anything which is based on your choice. We'll just provide you links where you can read more on what every operating system does. So after you've chosen that, just go on and download virtual machine, VirtualBox. Then you can choose the ISO file. Then you can start with the installation process. So if after we get an idea of which OS you have done, we'll just provide you with links like how to install that OS in the VirtualBox, so that you can follow the link and successfully you can install a Linux machine on your, like, on top of your Windows machine if you're in Windows, or if you're in Linux you don't have any work to do, or if you're in Mac you can do a virtual machine install. And after that, if anyone is interested in doing the bare metal version, like the dual boot version upon your like core computer, just let me know. I'll also help you through links. And if you have any issues, just let me know. So basically, this will be it. The homework for your this the task for this session is to choose your own VM and install your Linux flavor to your VM. So ensure every one of you at least have a VM of Linux installed, so that you can enjoy the, like, side by side. You will just see what you are doing and you can try it out on your own also. So just let us know if you have any issues. Else, all the best. Just try your installing Linux, and we will meet in the next session. We will just learn that.